They decorated the house like it was a base camp ceremony, balloons in red, white, and blue, a banner with my name, "Congratulations, Lieutenant Carrara Roar." My mother had printed programs for God's sake, with my headshot, like I'd won an election. I should have felt proud. I did, at first, until she walked in. Cassidy didn't even knock. She just opened the screen door like someone who had once belonged but wasn't sure anymore. She wore gray, a plain, faded blouse and black slacks. Not the kind of gray that tries to be minimalist, the kind you pick when you don't want to be noticed. I was holding a wine glass when she entered. I froze mid-toast. Dad didn't move. Mom blinked like Cassidy had materialized out of thin air. Aunt Kendra, never one to whisper, murmured, "Didn't you used to work at Applebee's?" Then louder, "Guess the uniform stuck." A few polite chuckles, not even malicious, just sharp in that effortless family way. I didn't laugh, but I didn't say anything either. Cassidy smiled, that kind of half-smile people give when they're used to being laughed at. She said quietly, "I'm better at serving now." It landed weird, like there was a double meaning I missed. The night moved on like it always did. Dad talked about my recent field scores. Mom told the story about the time I made my bed with hospital corners at age 6. Cassidy sat on the far end of the table, quiet, chewing slow, eyes down. She didn't interrupt. She didn't fight for space. Then someone said it. I don't remember who. Probably Kendra. "Cass, can you grab some forks from the kitchen? We're out again." And someone else added, "And maybe top off the water?" It was like a reflex. No one else even looked up. No one asked if she minded. No one noticed that she had barely touched her plate. She went. That's when I caught it, that tightening behind her smile. Not anger, not even hurt. Just restraint, like she was used to disappearing for others. When she came back, she stood behind the last empty chair, mine. Someone had shifted the name cards. Every spot at the table was taken. My dad was now between me and Cassidy. Her name had never been there. She paused, eyes scanning like she was calculating something. And then Mom, without a blink, said, "There's a folding chair on the porch. You can sit there." Just like that. Not, "Let me make room." Not, "Take my seat." Not even a soft, "Sorry." A command like Cassidy had never been more than a guest in her own family. Cassidy didn't flinch. She nodded, grabbed her glass, and slipped out the back door. I couldn't move. My spine stayed straight, but my stomach twisted. She sat out there for almost 2 hours, alone. Just wind and propane from the half-broken grill and the sound of forks clinking inside. And the worst part? I didn't go after her. The last time I saw Cassidy before that night was nearly a year ago, briefly, when she came through base for a contractor meeting. She'd handed me a gym bag, said it had extra socks, snacks, maybe a charger. I never opened it. She always felt older, distant, like she belonged to some unfinished life, like her presence was a reminder of what not to do. Everyone said it. Cassidy cracked. She couldn't handle orders. She dropped out of ROTC sophomore year, too soft. Don't pull a Cassidy. So I didn't. I was obedient. I rose. I made rank. I said yes, sir, faster than I thought. I stood straighter than I felt, and I never once asked her why she left. After the party, when the house had emptied and the slideshow had looped a third time, photos of me in uniform, on stage, in the field, I walked past the porch on the way to the garage. Cassidy was still out there, glass empty, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't look at me, but she said, "Funny, isn't it, how folding chairs are always kept just out of sight, just in case someone unexpected shows up." I stopped. She turned then, finally, and added, "You don't get to be surprised, Carrara. You never asked where I went." Then she stood, smoothed her slacks, and walked away. Not fast, not dramatic. Just final. That was the night I opened the gym bag. Inside, tucked beside a rolled hoodie, was a steel drive, brushed metal, no label, just a faint etching of a grid. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that now. I plugged it into my tablet. It buzzed. Access request, Echo Terminal Clearance, Civilian Proxy. I froze. The screen flashed again. Access logged. Oversight alert triggered. Then it went black. I yanked the drive out like it was burning. Somewhere in the base, miles away, someone knew I'd just triggered something. And if Cassidy was who I thought she was, then why did her drive require a clearance I'd never heard of? That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, every breath heavier than the last. For the first time in years, I thought, what if I've been wrong? What if the failure wasn't Cassidy? And beneath that, what if I just lit a fuse neither of us can put out? I used to think Cassidy just gave up, that she dropped out of ROTC because she couldn't hack it, that she folded under pressure and slipped into some low-aimed, anonymous life. Applebee's, maybe a call center, maybe some nonprofit job that let her hide behind spreadsheets and civilian excuses. It's what everyone said. It's what I believed, because believing that made it easier to stand tall in my own uniform. When I made lieutenant, no one said, well done. They said, not like your sister. Like her failure gave my success more shine. Like she existed only as a warning sign on my road. But now I had this steel drive in my drawer. And an alert ping burned into the security logs. And a sister who sat outside alone at her own family's table, taking hits with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Something didn't add up. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I went to the base gym, not to work out, just to breathe. But I didn't bring headphones. I brought the drive. I found a quiet bench in the back locker room, plugged it into a private tablet with low-level clearance. My clearance. Enough to peek. The screen pulsed. Echo protocol. Civilian interface node. Level black. Then a red bar. Oversight logged. I backed out fast, heart pounding. But before it went dark, I saw one name flash on the screen. Cassidy Rohr. Not Cass, not contractor. Commander. My breath caught. I remembered something then. Something small. I was 10. Cassidy was 15. She had brought home a trophy. Not for sports, not even grades. A debate competition, regional level. She'd beaten high school seniors with 3 years on her. Mom barely looked up. That's nice, she'd said, but you should have joined track. Colleges like athletes more. Dad was worse. Talking doesn't win wars. Cassidy just nodded and took her plate to the sink. I remember the sound of her trophy knocking against the cabinet as she tried to make space for it. I also remember that 2 weeks later, she gave it to me, said I could keep it in my room. I thought she was being nice. Now I think she was done trying to be seen. Everyone thought I looked up to Cassidy when I was a kid. But really, I was told not to be like her. She's too intense. She thinks too much. She can't take a joke. So I smiled more. I learned to nod at things I didn't agree with. I marched in line. I got medals for fitting the mold. Meanwhile, Cassidy vanished. She left school with no fanfare. Didn't even pack properly. Just disappeared. They told me she cracked under pressure. Panic attacks. Anxiety. Couldn't handle commands. I never asked her directly. I just believed them. It was easier. Until now. Until a steel drive hummed in my hand like a question I'd ignored for too long. The next morning, I requested access to the off-site archives, under the guise of doing background for an upcoming rotation. Just enough cover to poke around. There was nothing under Cassidy Rohr in any civilian registry. Not military, not reserves, not contractor lists. But there were blacked-out entries, time gaps, data jumps, redacted logistics files with C. Rohr as witness or handler, but no digital trail before or after, like someone was in the room, but never officially entered it. I cornered Sergeant Frey by the observation tower later that afternoon. He was known for being brutal in training, but weirdly respectful when you hit him direct. I asked, "Do you know someone named Commander Rohr?" He paused. "Why?" His eyes narrowed like a warning. "I think she's my sister," I said, "but she's not in any system." He didn't blink. "Then maybe she's not meant to be." I kept digging. There was a line buried deep in a training manual appendix, not the kind cadets read, but the ones buried in Ops protocol. Echo operations are not acknowledged under standard chain of command. Civilian clearance required. Access without proxy authorization triggers internal oversight. Cassidy hadn't vanished. She'd been erased. When I came home that night, Dad was watching sports. I sat beside him, not really thinking, just needing to not be alone. He nodded at the screen and said, "Now that's discipline. You could learn something from those guys." I looked at him, all my medals, all my ranks, and he still said, "You could learn something." And Cassidy? The one who walked away from all this? She'd carried more weight in silence than any of us ever did shouting. Later, I stood in the garage. Cassidy's gym bag still sat by the shelf. I hadn't touched it since pulling the drive. There was one more pocket I hadn't checked. Inside, a note, handwritten. No greeting, no explanation. When no one looks for you, you learn how to hide in plain sight. I stared at that line for a long time. That was her life. Not abandoned, not failed, invisible, on purpose. Somewhere on this base or somewhere far beyond it, my sister had built something no one ever gave her credit for. Something I'd triggered by mistake. And now, I wasn't sure if she'd forgive me. But I was starting to wonder if she'd trained me for this moment all along. They called me in just past 0300. No explanation, no names. Just a knock on my barracks door and the phrase, "You're being transferred for temporary observation." They didn't say where. They didn't have to. I already knew who was behind it. The room was colder than it needed to be, sterile, windowless, lit like an interrogation chamber, but too quiet for a threat. Cassidy was already there, sitting at the far end of the conference table. Beside her stood Sergeant Frey, arms crossed, unreadable. She didn't stand when I entered, didn't flinch. She just nodded once and said, "Sit." I sat. My palms itched. My throat felt tight, like I'd swallowed a confession but didn't know which one. She slid the steel drive across the table. "That wasn't a training file," she said. "That's a federal security node tied to Echo operations." Her tone was even, too even, like someone used to keeping explosive truths in airtight containers. I swallowed. "I didn't mean to. I know." She didn't raise her voice. But meaning doesn't undo damage. The sentence hit harder than I expected. It wasn't a scolding, it was a statement of consequence. "You have any idea what you touched?" she asked, softer now. I shook my head. "That drive is part of a system that doesn't officially exist. It connects to files that, if pulled, could expose field agents mid-op. You didn't open a door, Carrara. You kicked a hole in a wall that was built to stay sealed." I looked up at her. Finally. "You're really... all this?" She paused. Didn't nod, didn't brag. Just said, "I never left the work. I just left the spotlight." And in that moment, I understood the one truth I'd been blind to my whole life. My sister wasn't a failure. She was a ghost. By design. Sergeant Frey stepped forward. "She didn't report you. She could've. Should've. We flagged your access attempt and traced it in under 10 minutes. I turned toward Cassidy. "Why didn't you?" She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. "Because you're not the enemy," she said. Then quieter. "And maybe you deserve the truth." She opened her laptop. The screen filled with cascading logs, dates, pings, metadata. "We're running a silent diagnostic. Your trigger didn't go deep, but it woke up something old, something we buried." I stared at the screen as she scrolled. Her fingers moved fast, deliberate, trained. Lines of code flickered like a language I almost understood but never learned. Then she froze. One file, buried inside a legacy server, 5 years old. She tilted the screen toward me. Curtis Vaughn. My heart skipped. That name wasn't supposed to resurface. "Former contractor," she said. "Designed the early Echo simulations. I flagged him once for injecting rogue scripts. He vanished after termination." Sergeant Frey leaned in. "You're saying he left a trap?" Cassidy nodded. "A digital landmine. Something that would only activate if someone stumbled onto it with partial clearance. Someone like her." I blinked. "So, I didn't just make a mistake. I set off something meant for you?" Her silence was answer enough. We sat still for a long beat. I'd been used, not by Cassidy, by someone I didn't even know was still in the system. "He wanted you exposed," I whispered. She nodded. "And you gave him the perfect door." There it was, the pain. But she didn't say it cruelly, just truthfully, quietly, like someone who'd bled already and now just pointed to the scar. I should have cried, should have screamed. Instead, I just asked, "How do we close it?" Her eyes flicked up. For the first time, something flickered in them. Not pity, not superiority, relief. We worked through the night. Logs, timestamps, archived directories. She coached me through it, not with warmth, but with precision. Don't scroll. Search. Think like someone trying not to be caught. He didn't hide this to bury it. He hid it to resurrect it. The way she read systems, it wasn't just training. It was instinct, like reading shadows in motion. At one point, I looked at her and said, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She paused, then answered with something I'll never forget. Because surviving sometimes requires silence, especially when no one ever asked. That line sat between us like a weight neither of us could lift. At 0500, we found the trigger script. Vaughn had embedded it in a fake update patch, something that would auto-ping every time a drive like mine accessed Echo Terminal logs. Silent, smart, malicious. Cassidy deleted the key node. I flagged his contractor ID. Frey filed a silent report. No chain of command, no headlines. Before we left the room, Cassidy turned to me. "You're not in trouble, but you're not out of it either." I nodded. "Then let me finish it." As we stepped into the hallway, the first light of morning pushed through the narrow windows. She didn't say goodbye, but before she turned the corner, she said over her shoulder, "You were never supposed to see me like this. I was never meant to be seen at all." And then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, holding the ghost of who I thought she was, and the weight of who she really is. And for once, I wasn't proud of being the golden child. I was ashamed that I'd never looked deeper. Not until now. The tribunal room felt like a courtroom, but colder. Wood-paneled walls, straight-backed chairs lined up like soldiers. No flags, no cheers. Just fluorescent silence and the faint buzz of surveillance feeds humming in the background. Cassidy sat across from me, shoulders squared, hands folded, jaw calm. Curtis Vaughn stood near the podium, dressed like a civilian, but every inch of him radiated control. His kind always did. The men who know just enough truth to twist it. He raised a file. One paragraph was redacted in thick black strokes. He tapped it with practiced indifference. "This," he said, "details Commander Rohr's failure to report civilian casualties during Operation Halbert. It calls into question not only her judgment but her loyalty to federal protocol." He spoke like a man delivering a weather report. I watched him, unbothered, deliberate. He was playing his game. The one Cassidy had seen coming years ago. The presiding colonel looked at her. "Commander Rohr? Response?" Cassidy didn't flinch. She reached into her folder and slid forward a laminated directive, signed, dated, coded. "That paragraph? That's a summary. Here's the full order. Vaughn issued the clearance to breach the perimeter without intel confirmation, then cut comms." Silence. She continued. "He gave the command, ensured there'd be no pushback, and now he's trying to rewrite history." There was a pause. Tight, tense. Then Frey stepped forward. "Permission to play recovered audio." The colonel nodded. A soft crackle. Then Cassidy's voice, 5 years younger but unmistakably firm. "Hold fire. Possible civilian presence. Wait for recon confirmation." The room didn't breathe. Vaughn didn't move. He just shifted his weight, barely. Then I stood. In my hands, the full access log Vaughn had triggered. 2 years ago, I said, this man used a fake contractor ID to tamper with archive nodes. He embedded dormant code to make it look like Commander Rohr was the one rewriting files. He didn't just sabotage the system. He tried to rewrite history. That was the moment it changed. The air didn't explode, but it shifted. From tension to something colder. Respect. For the first time, they weren't looking at Cassidy like a ghost. They were looking at her like a survivor. They cleared her, quietly. No speech, no ceremony. Just a brief nod, an internal memo, and an offer to reinstate her rank and clearance. She accepted the rank. declined the rest. If being seen means someone else takes the hit, then I'll stay where they don't have to, she said. That line stayed with me. A medal would have been easier to carry than that sentence. That night, I found her alone near the airstrip. She was staring out across the tarmac like it was the edge of the world. Her bag was already packed. No fanfare, no luggage tags. I approached, slowly. I didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't need it. She'd heard that before. Empty, delayed, performative. So I said, "You told me I kicked a hole in a wall that was built to stay sealed." She glanced at me, half a smile. I held out a small silver badge. Standard issue, nothing fancy. I had to pull a few strings to get it out of requisitions. It had no rank on it, just a quiet emblem of leadership. I pressed it into her hand. "I don't want to wear it," I said. "I want to deserve it." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she hugged me, not like an older sister comforting a kid, but like someone letting go of armor. No more roles, no more ranks, just two people who finally saw each other for real. Before she boarded, she handed me a letter. I didn't read it until later, when the jet had disappeared into the clouds and I was alone on the barracks cot. It was a single line, scrawled in Cassidy's steady hand. "If you ever forget who you are, start here." Taped to the bottom of the note was a photo. Old, grainy. Me at age 8, sitting on her lap, holding her debate trophy like it was mine. Her smile in that photo? Full. Unbroken. Like she still believed there was space in the world for both of us. She'd carried me longer than I realized. Not just in that photo. In silence. In shadows. In sacrifice. And now, I finally saw her. Not as a dropout. Not as a disappointment. But as the blueprint I'd been blindly following all along.